Most familiar with the emerging science of history there. When he came back to the U.S., he wanted to employ the methods and practices he witnessed to write a sweeping history of the United States. Like Sharon Turner and Augustin Terry, he pointed to the ancient Germanic origins of the English people as the beginning of the American people's quest for liberty. He depicted a colonial people who threw off servitude and inequality by breaking away from the English rule. In Bancroft's history, Americans were united by a common cause and unified passion to create a nation of liberty and prosperity. There was an exception to this model in Richard Hildreth, who was a historian that disagreed with the uncritical positivism promoted by writers like Bancroft. Hildreth believed that history should be more scientific, systematic, and critical of the past. He pointed out that the emergence of democracy was capricious and not universal throughout the nation, and the American people were not captured by his spirit, guiding them on the track towards something greater. Most other historians of the time did not agree with Hildreth's interpretation of the American spirit. However, they did look to transform the practice of history and also criticized Bancroft, who they believed should have been more scientific in nature. Francis Parkman promoted a fuller understanding of the past in the spirit of Hildreth. Parkman was interested in the colonial western frontier occupied by the French and English empires before the American Revolution. Parkman, who was nearly close to blind, visited the actual sites he studied, as well as numerous repositories and archives to consult the primary sources in detail missing in Bancroft's own work. Unlike Bancroft, Parkman did not engender the English as the protagonists of the U.S. march toward liberty, but it was the French nation, an absolute monarchy with strong ties to the Catholic Church, that were the foreign threat to the Indians and forests of the Old Northwest. Since the English were a constitutional monarchy, they were the characters who embodied the spirit of liberty for Parkman. Parkman's views and influence would be followed by William Prescott and John Motley. Prescott wrote about the Spanish in the Americas, while Motley wrote about the Dutch in North America. For both these writers, the Spanish were people that came from an illegitimate political system that promoted an absolute rule and close ties to the Catholic Church. Prescott tried to note the achievement of the Spanish while disdaining absolutism and Catholicism, and Motley depicted the Dutch and their war with the Spanish as analogous to the U.S. defeating the British in order to create democracy in North America. Okay, let's recap and review the major ideas of the classical school. Number one, they emphasized primary research and wrote histories based on the study of original documents. Number two, they promoted positivism. They believed that humankind was on a track towards something greater. Number three, they all believed in historicism. This was the Rankian idea that historians should view the past through the eyes of the past and not the present. Von Ranke believed that would ensure objectivity. This was only an idea. Remember, with all the historians we mentioned, these histories served to promote their country or their people as the undisputed example of the human quest for liberty and democracy, which brings us to our last point. Number four, nationalism. These histories were written to promote nationalism within these countries and make the citizens of those countries feel as if they were part of a greater whole. By the end of the 19th century, this generation of historians would die out, and new generations would emerge and replace these historians and their ideas. The new generation would look to become more systematic and more scientific and move history down a path towards creating it into much more of a science than the classical school had ever imagined. In the next audio file, we'll examine the rise of the scientific schools of history.